Yo, let me start off by asking, do you all know what a unicorn is? Nah, not that, not that. Do you know what a unicorn is, like in a sexual reference? It's like I asked this question because it goes back to what I talked about in the backbreaking sex episode, where I talked about different people liking different things and all of that stuff. A, a unicorn, in this case, is a woman that agrees to join a married couple as a third wheel in a sexual encounter. So if you bring a woman in for a threesome, that woman is known as the unicorn. So if you're a couple, yeah, you bring a woman in, the woman that you bring in is known as the unicorn. Now, if you're a couple and you bring a man in as an extra, I don't really know what he's called. I guess in theory, if you really think about it, he probably should be the one called the unicorn, if you really get what I mean. But it's just funny. I saw that over the weekend and it made me think about that episode. And it seems like ever since that episode got published, it was like I've been hearing about all of these new terms and new things that people like fetishes and stuff like that. So I just figured I'd throw that out there. You're welcome. So anyway, all right, let me get to it. And hi, how you doing? Tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends and all of that stuff. But now that that's out of the way, I want to talk about a couple things that I admittedly have limited knowledge of. Like over the weekend, the first thing is I watched that movie Fences, the movie from back in the day with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. Um, and it was actually adapted from a play by August Wilson back in the day. Anyway, for people that didn't see it, it was set in the 1950s. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'd never watched it before. And honestly, when it came on this weekend, I saw about half of it. I caught it in the middle and just figured I'd keep it on while I did other things. So I watched the second half of it. So I never saw it back in 2016. That's when the movie was released, and I definitely never saw the play. I shouldn't say definitely, but I didn't see the play. And the reason for it, honestly, is because man, I'm tired of watching movies and plays and stuff about black people struggling. It's like I lived it, I saw it, I got the t-shirt. Yeah, it's like yeah, I'm done with the whole adaptations of the black man and woman getting beaten down, and God knows, I'm definitely done with the slavery flicks. But if you have kids, I guess they should see it because they should know. Anyway, moving on. From what I watched of that movie, though, even though I watched like the second half of it, I pretty much got the gist of it. At least I feel comfortable that I got the gist of it. So, but with that said, for all of you people that are like, I can't believe you didn't watch it and all of this stuff, as I go into the summary, please forgive me if I left out a detail or two. Again, I said I got the gist of it. I'm not gonna like quote it verbatim or anything like that. But there's a man that seems that he went to jail. He got out of jail, got back with his wife and family. He wound up cheating on his wife and wound up having a side chick with some jump off or something like that. Even though in the 1950s they weren't calling them jump offs, whatever they called them back then, a hussy. I don't know. Shoot. So that was part of it. He had a side kid. And then his son that he actually had with his actual wife, he hated his guts because his skills as a parent were, let's just say his skills as a parent were kind of lacking. And also he hated his dad's guts, Denzel's character, um, because of the way that he saw Denzel's character treating his mother. So, and speaking of that mother, Denzel's wife, Viola Davis's character, there she was all along playing the role of the dutiful wife, even when she found out that he had the side baby or was going to have the side baby. So, despite everything that he did, it's like while she may have gotten a little bit or even a lot upset by all the things that he did, she was always there even when he died. Hopefully, I didn't spoil the ending for y'all. It's like, hey, if you didn't know he died at the end, you should have went and saw it in 2016. That's not my fault. Or saw the play in 1985 or whatever, or lived the story for yourself in 1950. I don't know. Either way, if I spoiled it for you though, I do apologize. But that was the gist of it. Dude did all of this stuff. His wife was there supporting him, standing tall the whole time. Even when he died, she was bigging him up and stuff like that, singing his praises to their son. She wound up taking care of the son because the side piece, the hussy, she wound up dying during childbirth. So it left Viola Davis's character to raise the kid alone. And she still wasn't talking trash about Denzel's character. So that was interesting. So that was part of the weekend. A movie that was set in the 1950s. Also, during this past weekend, I got a text Saturday morning at 12:28 a.m. So right after midnight, asking from a friend of mine who asked if I ever watched a show called Put a Ring on It. Okay. This was interesting to me because about a month ago, me and a friend, we hung out a little bit, and she texted me again around midnight as well, asking me if I had seen the same show. Now, they were texting me for different reasons, which I found to be interesting. One thought it was the dumbest show that she'd ever seen. The other was actually intrigued by the show. Go figure that one. So even though I was familiar with the show, after getting those texts from those two different people, I felt like compelled to watch the show just to kind of get an idea of what it was about, since they watched it. They had two totally different views on it. I had to get a feel for it myself. So I got through about 30 minutes of it and figured that I had seen enough. Kind of like I saw half of Fences and figured that I got the gist of it. I saw 30 minutes of this show and feel like I got the gist of it. Now, mind you, this was season two of the show. It had been on for one season. This is the second season. And of the season plus one or whatever, I watched 30 minutes of it and feel like I saw enough. So, just like my summary with Fences, please forgive me if I miss a detail or two when summarizing Put a Ring on It, just like you would have to forgive me if I missed a detail or two when summarizing Fences. But basically, Put a Ring on It is about three couples, and they're on the show because the women in these couples, they want to get married. And while the men profess their undying love for their girlfriends, for one reason or another, they're not ready to get married. Let's just say yet, to give these brothers the benefit of the doubt. So, what the show does is they set up both members of the relationship on blind dates. So it's three couples. They take all of them and set them up on blind dates to see if the grass is greener on the other side for the women. And I assume to show the men how good they have it at home and to push them into putting a ring on it. Now, again, I've gleaned all of this from watching half of one episode. So, and with that said, at the end of the season, my assumption is that the men had to make a decision to propose to their girlfriends or break up with them. That seems kind of extreme. You go on a TV show and you have to break up at the end of it. Yeah, yeah, I might have gotten that part wrong. I know at the end of this, if this, well, I don't know. At the end of the season, I assume they have to come to some kind of conclusion as to where the relationship is headed, and whether they propose on that episode or they just agree to put more effort in. I don't know, man. Let me stop speculating on this mess. So anyway, so the question is, why am I talking about this movie? Why am I talking about a movie which is seen as a reflection of real life in the 1950s for a black couple in this case, and in comparison to a modern day reality show, which is seen as a reflection of real life for also a black couple in the same episode. So why am I talking about this 1950s movie and this 2021 reality show in this particular episode? Well, It's because, strangely enough, you know how my mind works by now, if you listen to the 65 episodes of this so far, it's because I see similarities in both, which is kind of sad that relationships don't seem to be evolving from the 1950s to now. Like Denzel Washington's character in Fences, he wasn't a bad dude. And I guess it all depends on who you ask. It's like the way his wife defended him in the end, it's like, I guess she didn't see him as such a bad guy, you know? But he seemed more like a guy that did some bad things while trying to figure things out, you know? Like many people back in those days, I'd imagine, because I'm not that old, thank goodness. I'd imagine that he didn't have like the ideal structure in place to show him the ways of like manhood and husbandhood and parenthood and all of that. So, in trying to figure it out for himself, he probably had a few oops moments. Well, he definitely had a few oops moments. He had a side baby, so yeah, we'll call that one oops moment. So, but yeah, he had a few oops moment. And from what I saw, on Put a Ring on It, the three boyfriends, they don't seem like bad guys either. Again, I guess that would depend on who you ask. But they seem to be guys trying to figure it out themselves. And while, at least from the 30 minutes that I saw, I didn't see that any of them had side babies, but they could have. uh, it just seems like they're trying to figure out how they feel about this marriage thing and all of that. Doesn't make them bad, you know. But unfortunately, though, like way too many people today, it's like the ideal structure still isn't in place to show many guys the ways of manhood and put a ring on its case, boyfriendhood or parenthood, because I know that some of the guys had kids or something like that. And like the great Viola Davis's character in Fences, despite being unfulfilled, in this case by their boyfriends, the girlfriends on this TV show, they're standing by their men. And the question that I had while watching that TV show was why, you know? It's like in Viola Davis's case in Fences, it's a little actually a lot more understandable of why she stood by Denzel's character, because that was set in the 1950s, like where the man and woman had those traditional roles. See how I'm tying it back to the past podcast, traditional roles. How they had those traditional roles where the man worked, that was his thing, and the wife kept the house. So, despite whatever misgivings Denzel might have had in that movie, if she left, it's like, how was she gonna live? You know, they had kids and stuff like that. She had to raise the kids, so they were only living off of his paycheck. That was the role back then in those days. And not to harp on this, but if Denzel's character had lived till today, this is just on a side note. If Denzel's character had lived till today, um, they would have been married for like 50, 60 years or something like that. And people would have been looking at them like talking about they've been married for 50 plus years. They're like hashtag goals. It's so beautiful watching them not even realizing all of the stuff that she had to put up with, the side baby, the other stuff. And he was kind of a jerk. But, you know, it was the 50s. He was trying to figure it out. Benefit of the doubt, like I said before. But on that side note, man, some of you all need to wake up looking at these old couples thinking that that's what you want to be just because they old as fuck. I mean, just because they're old and they're still together, you just automatically assume that everything was great. And nah. The stuff that they went through to make it those 50 years, I guarantee you it's not stuff that you this 2021 modern day human being would put up with. Nah, y'all not putting up with the stuff like that they put up with. Anyway, so it makes sense to me why women would stay in the 50s, but I don't understand why women would stay today. Like, what about to put a ring on their girlfriends? Like, why would they stay? They want to be married. Their boyfriends don't. And considering how we all should know, especially the demographic of this podcast, how ineffective ultimatums are, then why do they stay? You know? Now, I can see some of you all viewing my question as being harsh and judgmental and all of that. But the question is, I guess that I wonder is, how important is marriage to you really? To those women on the show, how important is marriage really? Because if marriage is a, I would like to have it, then you can use the other positives in the relationship to outweigh the whole marriage idea. But with that said, if it's like a must have, then it's not being harsh to be like, yo, why are you staying? Matter of fact, if marriage is a must have, I think that's definitely the question to ask. Why are you staying? Like, if it's a must have, then there isn't anything in the relationship that should outweigh the marriage idea. And now here's another question for the girlfriends. Do they want to be married or do they want a wedding? Because if the girlfriends can't get married without the pomp and circumstance, then I can kind of understand the pushback of the boyfriends. But as a man, I truly feel that if I truly feel that I'm with someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with, then we can go right down to the courthouse if marriage is the goal. And then later on, maybe we can plan like a reception at a future time. But if we just talking about marriage, that's the easiest way to handle it. So, as a woman, one of those women on that show, if a guy says that he knows for a fact that you're the one that he's going to spend his life with, the easiest way to prove it is for those ladies to propose. Okay, cool. Let's just go to the courthouse then. If I'm that one and you're telling me that, let's go settle this thing right now. And then if he pushes back for any reason, at least that can lead to like a more specific conversation about why, like as opposed to like the vague answers that too many men and women give in relationships. It's like at least you can find out what you need to be doing more of or less of to get what you want from that dude. And if you can't get a specific answer or specific answers that you're looking for, then you have to make a decision for yourself. And if you don't get the if you don't get the satisfactory answers, it goes back to the original question that I asked, which is, why do you stay? It's like when you look at some of the things that a man will break up with a woman for, it's a whole lot less than something as serious than marriage. I tell you what, I can go into some of the things I've broken up with women for, and boy, you would be kind of surprised. But shoot, it was because those were my deal breakers. Those were my must haves. They didn't have them, so I wasn't gonna beat around the bush trying to convince them to be something that they didn't want to be or do something that they didn't want to do. Either you with it or you're not. But anyway, but marriage will be a must-have for a woman, but they won't press a dude on it for fear of pushing them away. Men don't necessarily have that problem. But if it's a must-have, is that a bad thing if you push him away? If it's a like to have, then there's no issue. Like, like I read an interview with Rose Byrne. Rose Byrne, she was in the movie Neighbors, and she was also in that movie Bridesmaids and some other stuff. Actually, she's been in a lot of stuff, but those are the two things that popped in my mind just at this moment. But she was asked why she and her boyfriend of 9 years haven't gotten married, and they like live as a couple. They have kids together, the whole nine. And she was just like basically paraphrasing, "Yeah, we'll get to it." So see, to me, that's how you act in a quote unquote like to have relationship with marriage is something that you would like to have, but there are more positives and negatives. So for these women again on the show, you know, it seemed, at least from what I saw, that they're in that must have category. Rose Byrne wouldn't be on put a ring on it because she's like, yo, this is good. This is good. But anyway, her whole thing. But anyway, like I said before, so while I was able to think of some reasons that Viola would stay with Denzel, I'm still scratching my head to figure out why to put a ring on it. Women would stay with these guys if they're so desperate for marriage that they sign up for a reality show to force their boyfriends into a decision, basically an ultimatum. To summarize what I'm thinking in all of this, and the bigger question is, why is anyone staying with any other person if that person is lacking something on your must have or deal breaker list? So when talking about how things haven't like evolved, like from the 1950s to 2021, we still seem to be in the same cycle of women, whether it be the 50s or today, being with guys that they probably shouldn't be with. And to be clear and to reiterate, it doesn't mean that the guys are bad, because they're not bad because you two aren't compatible. And that's part of the problem with today versus the 1950s. Viola wasn't compatible with Denzel, but she stayed and didn't appear to be bitter. It's the choice that she made. But today, man, too many women stand with these dudes they're not compatible with, and appearing to be bitter because of it. And despite having choices that Viola didn't have, too many women feel like that compatible boyfriend is like a microcosm for all, or at least most men, and therefore they don't feel like they really have a choice. Basically, women of Viola Davis didn't have a choice in the 1950s in the movie Fences. Women today have a choice, but they've convinced themselves that they don't have a choice. So it's almost like women of today are stuck into that 1950s mindset where they just better take what they can get. But ladies, trust your man. And trust this piece of advice. I'm here to tell you, you are not Viola Davis. And well, don't get it twisted. There's some guys out here that are like Denzel's, and not in that good Denzel way. Even though I don't really know that women are checking for Denzel like that anymore. Are women checking for Denzel? I don't think so. Ever since that Roman Esquire movie and stuff like that, you've been looking pretty rough lately. You've been looking his age, actually. I think he's like in his mid 60s. Hey, you have to start fading eventually. But when I say there are Denzels out here, I mean Denzel's character in Fences, who are trying to figure it out, have a few oops moments. The bottom line is they're not compatible with you. As a matter of fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm sure every woman will say there are quite a few Denzels out here. Uh, and and whether the guys don't put a ring on it, whether they are Denzels or not, those women have a choice. And ladies, it's you have a choice. It's about choosing who's right for you, and not who's the best available option of a bunch of incompatible options. Who's the best available option out of a bunch of incompatible options? Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's like the whole thing about having a piece of man versus no man at all. That was acceptable in the 50s when you needed somebody to pay rent and all that stuff, and fulfill his role as a man in the 50s, because women weren't allowed to do some of those things. That doesn't apply today. It's like the same way that you can tell a man that they need to do better, eh, and you're right in some ways. Ladies, y'all can do better too. Do better with your choices, that is. Yeah. So, in summary, ladies, get out of that 50s, 1950s prison, that 1950s mindset that you put yourself in, you know, thinking that you have to strong arm a man into marrying you and all that stuff, instead of giving him the option and letting him go if he chooses the option that's not compatible with you. I promise you, you'll be okay. Now that's my public service announcement for this episode. Let me close by talking about a couple things. Markie died, finally. And when I say finally, I don't mean that to be dismissive. I basically mean that because of all of the false reports that I talked about on previous episodes in the past, where they falsely reported that he had died weeks ago. But while, so rest in peace to him. And while I mentioned him before, so I won't dwell on him and all of that, I'll just say again, rest in peace. But there was another death over the weekend. Um, Keisha Cole's mother, Frankie, passed away. She was 61. So just like Biz, who was 57, she was 61. The point is, she was way too young. And I don't know how many people remember Keisha Cole's reality show. I think it was on BET, and it featured Keyshia, obviously, and her sister Neffy and her mother Frankie. And it was like appointment television. It wasn't like being Bobby Brown. That was on a whole different level, but it was entertaining. And from that show, that's how Frankie, Keisha Cole's mother, became a star in her own right. And how that applies to this show about dating is because I remember that when she was popular, one of the local radio stations here in Atlanta, they had her on for an interview. And during the interview, they decided to have a special session for her to take calls. And they were taking calls specifically from people who needed relationship advice. Now, if people watch the reality show and they remember the reality show, they know why this is funny to me because it should be funny to them as well. But for people that didn't watch the show, I will just say, and I'll be brief with this because she's passed and I don't want to like make it seem like I'm having fun or anything at her expense or anything like that. But the reason it's funny is because part of that show was devoted to documenting her past dating history, which wasn't the most positive experience. So that's as far as I'll go with that. But what was funny to me about it, as she was taking calls from people who were asking her what they should do, women who were asking her what they should do about their men in these certain scenarios, it just showed back then and even today how, man, if you have any type of celebrity, you can be seen as an expert at anything despite the evidence otherwise. So despite all the things that she gone through with guys, she's like dropping knowledge on these women who are like eating it up. And I'm just like, dude, did you not watch the reality show? But hey, that's me. But yeah, rest in peace. Rest in peace. And I will not dwell on this like I do when I talk about these premature passings, but I will say, as I always do, go to the doctor. And actually, when you go, actually do what they tell you to do. So, and you can get some dick pills if you want them, but I guess that wouldn't apply for women. But anyway, go to the doctor, y'all. And the last thing I'll say is Mick Jagger is 77 years old. See that transition to Mick Jagger? 77 years old. I saw a picture with him and his 34-year-old girlfriend. I don't understand how that works on so many levels. But boy, you gotta love money. Thanks for listening, y'all. I'm Michael. That's all I have to say. Hopefully, people didn't see me as being too judgmental and all of that, too lecturing and all of that stuff. But man, some of this stuff is just weird to me. It's just weird to me. But come back Friday and be part of more weirdness. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for consuming however you consume. I really appreciate it. Say goodbye, Reggie. Reggie didn't say anything, so I'll say it on his behalf. Goodbye.